Good morning, America. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy. We've got a very interesting show today. Unfortunately, a lot of people will call the IRS. They'll rely on what they share, the advice and what they tell them they need to do, and it turns out to be wrong. Even more so, people go online and they try to get information on that. The IRS has an official disclaimer saying you can't rely on that, and the disclaimer has since been buried. So we're going to talk about how to get good information about the IRS, despite the fact that, again, it's in the Bill of Rights that they put out. That's part of the IRS code that you should know what your rights and options are, but sometimes it's harder than ever with the current IRS. So stay tuned. We've got a lot to cover. Welcome back, everybody. We have a lot of interesting news, important news, so we're just going to dive right into it. And first article here is from Fox. If I can pull it up. Here we go. And interesting here, Netanyahu's in the country now, and he came to address Congress. And Israel being one of our most important allies in the world, it really has become a political divide. It used to be bipartisan support for Israel. Now, again, we had protests that came in, took over part of the Capitol, were banging on doors, etc., and protesting Netanyahu coming and speaking to Congress. So right now they're right in the middle trying to negotiate another peace, temporary peace, in exchange for the rest of the hostages, Israeli hostages. Who knows how many of those are actually alive anymore? So again, it's very controversial, but everybody wants peace, and they're in the middle of negotiating for peace, but yet you had 200 protesters go in. And on the doors of Democrats as well, they were violently beating on all three of the doors next to where they were protesting. Staff and interns had to barricade themselves in their offices. Where were Capitol Police? Who knows? But eventually, a lot of people were arrested and hauled off. And attempted, they were also trying to attempt to force entry into the offices. So the question is, why all these protests over Netanyahu coming? Because, again, they think he's continued and exacerbated the war. But I think beyond this article, and one of the things some of the things it does mention in here is that he's come to speak to the American politicians and leadership. Joe Biden's not going to meet with him because he's ill or going through whatever he's going through. Kamala Harris isn't going to meet with him. Most of the Democrats, the Democrat leadership isn't going to be there. So again, it's interesting that Chuck Schumer isn't going to be there, and his second in command isn't going to be there either. It goes all the way down to someone else that isn't really in Democrat leadership that will meet and introduce him in the Senate, which is very interesting. But he's kind of become a pariah within the Democrat Party. So again, still trying to manage and hold together Israel when they're facing attack on two sides, and they still have regular rocket attacks from the north and the south from Gaza as well. So again, it's still a very dangerous situation for Israel, and a lot of people still have fled their homes in the north where there are continuous rocket attacks happening as we speak. So, the fact that he's come here, talked to his allies, and a lot of them are just ignoring him or completely avoiding him, I think, is very concerning. So another overseas asset or issue is this is Amazon. This is from the Epic Times. It had 131 million asset seizure in Italy. So Italy has alleged tax fraud and labor violations. The main thing is Amazon was outsourcing to other companies. rather than hiring enough people locally in Italy, so having full-time workers. So they're alleging tax fraud and legal labor practices. And so they hit them hard. Amazon is working to comply, or they running afoul of Italian labor laws. We'll see. They didn't deny it, but at the same time, they have come out and said, look, we're hiring all kinds of local people. Now, Amazon is very useful. I bought stuff from them. It's very easy, especially for harder to find items. But instead of going to stores and having it ordered or figured out, it's so easy to purchase from Amazon, but it really does kill local, smaller stores when Amazon becomes kind of this giant behemoth, well, the giant behemoth that it's become. So, again, they're dealing with a lot of negative local PR, but to counteract that, they're trying to employ 19,000 people in permanent roles, and that's roughly 1,000 times greater than the last announced last year, which means it only announced 19 more permanent people. So they're trying to address these issues. They're probably going to get hit with some massive fines, but it's Amazon, so I'm not too worried about them. Something that actually is a little more serious, or a lot more serious, is this Crwodstrike technology outage. I talked yesterday about how it's affecting small businesses. It's still hurting Delta. So day 4, and the question is, why is it still hurting Delta? This is supposed to be one of the better airlines. And ironically, here for Delta, I think one of the reasons they've been hit is because they have the most updated software. So, faulty software upgrade from one company really has thrown a huge monkey wrench at Delta. They're having to update every single computer to get past this. So it's hit airlines, hospitals, which is very scary, and businesses around the world. So again, this idea that you have, this is from Crwodstrike. So Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg announced that he expects the airline to provide hotels, meals for travelers who are delayed, and issue quick refunds. So if you have not been refunded, or if you had to go to a hotel, you're in the midst of dealing with this, keep your receipts, keep your information, because there's pressure on Delta to go ahead and quickly refund people for their costs caused by Delta's having to have to cancel, reschedule. So again, we're talking about 5,500 flights canceled since early Friday, including 700 canceled on Monday. So this has really hit Delta hard. United Airlines was the next worst performer, canceling 1,500 flights on Monday. They only canceled 17 though. Other airlines, American Airlines, Spirit Airlines, Frontier, and Allegiant Air are pretty much up to normal. Why? They're using outdated systems that were nearly as affected by Crwodstrike. So Delta, ironically, using newer, more up-to-date, all reliant on Windows, took the biggest hit here. So again, it's just created a cascading effect here. That's really ripped through Delta and also through other airlines and caused a lot of issues. So others, Southwest and Alaska, don't use Crwodstrike, and saw relatively few cancellations or issues. So if you need to reschedule, those are the ones to go through. So, and then it goes to a personal example, someone that went through that. He's keeping his receipts. So keep your receipts, keep your information together, and that will help you weather this. And hopefully the next couple days, this is all straightened out and the airlines can return to normal. So again, sometimes if buying that insurance so you can jump to another airline when things are canceled can be very helpful. So this next article, again, more about the some good and bad news about the housing market. Talked about yesterday about how people are talking about how Trumponomics, as the media is now starting to label Trump's economic ideas, could affect not only the economy but the larger market as well. So sales hit a 13-year low because of record highs, as we talked about in June. So June saw record highs, and that's continuing mostly through July. So prices aren't dropping yet, but the sale of homes fell 5.4% from May, and that's dropping to 3.89 million. That's the fourth consecutive monthly decline. So just to give you an idea of what this means. So again, you have surging prices, and the median sales price again in June was up 4.1%. Even though, and prices are still climbing, even though you have more homes, inventory still remains historically low. So in June, you had 1.32 million homes for sale, the highest since October 2020, but that's well below the 1.9 million before the pandemic. The current sales rate, it takes 4 months to sell all the available homes. And one of the, not seeing exactly where it was, but on the 3.89 million actually being sold yearly, the forecast was for around 4 million, and this was lower than even the most pessimistic forecasts. So the 4 million was very much a rock bottom number, and we've managed to go below that for the year. So again, it shows that the market's slowing down, and eventually prices will stop and decline. So the question is, when is that going to happen? When are interest rates actually going to go down? A lot of people are hoping, fingers crossed, that in September the interest rates get cut. But overall, with prices continuing to go up, inflation still going up, don't bank on them cutting interest rates anytime soon. It might happen. I don't know. But we still have a lot of very iffy economic news out there. If the inflation numbers don't improve, expect them to hold off on cuts. But it is probably coming in the next 6 months or so, depending on what happens with real inflation. Now, we're at a break, so coming up, and so we will be right back. Welcome back, everybody, and we're going to continue the conversation here. Jumping to an IRS article, and this is an interesting article. They've been coming out with these for tax professionals, making sure that they watch out for identity theft. And this is for clients as well as for tax professionals as well. But again, interesting article. What to watch for, basically, if someone, and this is for individuals as well as tax professionals, but when you're in your IRS account, if you see stuff created, you get notices you didn't request for, transcripts you didn't request, if you see, and these are obvious red flags, if your software is slow or actions take longer to process than usual, well, that's happens regularly. But if you see your computer cursor moves or changes numbers without touching the mouse or keyboard, or being locked out of a computer network, tax returns being rejected because Social Security number was already used on another return. So a lot of these things you should be watching for. And so again, this is something very helpful for tax professionals as well as, again, if in your own IRS accounts, if you see any of this happen, report it, raise these issues. Again, getting a PIN, a PIN for your tax returns, it takes a while, but once you get it, it can really help protect your account. That way nobody can get in without, or file a tax return on your behalf without having that PIN. It's very important, and I've had plenty of people where someone was using their information, sometimes even family members, and getting that PIN really helped turn it around. So jumping to the next article, this is from CNBC. If you are in this boat, if you are investing and you have an inherited IRA, you should be looking at ways, you should be talking to a tax professional on how to maximize and avoid taxes on these. So these are IRAs. Non-spouse beneficiaries have 10 years to deplete the IRA accounts. So you have to take the money out. And these are retirement accounts or IRAs inherited since 2020. And if the original account had already started to pull it down, required minimum distributions. Depending on what's happening with the tax code, so again, this is kind of goes along with what other professionals have been saying, that if you're only taking the minimums now and taxes go up, you could get hit with a lot more. And taxes, mainly they're talking about the expiration of the Trump tax cuts. So again, everything's scheduled to sunset in 2025, and it'll revert back to the old rates where you could be paying 28, 33, or even up to 40%. Currently, the highest rate is 37%, but you see the biggest jump here in the middle, from 24 and 32%. Up to around 28 and 33%. Or no, the 32% is, I think, is around 35%. So if you can take out more earlier, and that's for singles, same brackets, but for singles, it could really help save some money. So if you are taking out investments, one of the things that people are doing is, if you're not of retirement age, they're doing a similar thing with Roth IRAs. If you do have these assets and investments, it would absolutely help to talk to a tax professional, talk to someone about tax planning. Does it make sense? Pay taxes on what I have, roll it over into a Roth, so it's still in a retirement account, it's still saving money, but pay some taxes now while the tax rates are lower. And a lot of people, you'll still have time after the election to make these decisions, but Congress still has to act. And even if Trump becomes president, who knows what's going to happen in Congress? He might not have the majority in Congress and the House and Senate to get it done anyway. So who knows? We'll see. Um, so right now, those are the rules and the standards through 2025. So you do have time to make those payments, but if you're taking yearly distributions, you might want to start on that now and get that money down. So we're going to jump to our topic for the day. And this is really interesting. Came across this Forbes article. Scary truth. Unreliable IRS tax guidance. And believe this, believe it or not, from the IRS. So I'm going to try to, so many ads, drives me nuts. When you call the IRS, when you go online, you expect, if it's from the IRS, you would expect that you can rely on this information. And now if you see a post or a blog from a law firm or something like that, makes you feel like you can rely on it. You should be able to rely on it. Not so. And this is where a lot of people run into problems. There's a lot of bad information out there. The IRS gives out a lot of bad information. So be very wary. Sounds like a Winnie the Pooh episode. Be very wary, or when you're trying to get information from the IRS, that you get it from the right sources, but that you don't take it, that you know what your rights are beforehand. Because when they just come and tell you information, when they tell you something verbally, don't trust it. Whatever they tell you verbally, if you tell them, look, the IRS told me this, carries absolutely no weight. And I can't tell you how many times the IRS has given bad information to millions of taxpayers. And it's just, there's no consequence to the IRS when they're ill-informed. True story, I was in New York doing a seminar to a crowded hall of tax professionals, CPAs, some enrolled agents, etc., talking about the offer and compromise program. And I was going through and walking through how to do an offer and compromise. And I was co-presenting with a regional manager and her supervisor at the IRS. So as I was going through this, one of the things I shared is that for compliance purposes, you had to comply with the last 6 years of returns. Currently, the IRS is only going back to 2018. In the last few months, I've had people tell me, oh, well, we need 2017, we need 2016. I said, well, that's not correct. And they went, what? I said, per your IRM, and I can send you the IRM citation, you can only go back 6 years. And they kind of went, okay. But the IRS manager or regional manager and her supervisor I was dealing with, they weren't part of collections. It's not something they dealt with. So it wasn't something they were familiar with or knew. So again, there's many different sections within the IRS. If you're dealing with collections, the more experienced people, they know. When I call in and I'm talking to collections, I don't get any pushback on that because they all know. They're hiring and training so many new people that a lot of the new people don't know. When people call in to the first layers of the IRS, they don't know. They're kiddies. They've barely been trained. I don't know what training program they're putting them through, but again, they tell people all the time you have to file 10 years of returns, which is blatantly false. There's an IRM citation. If you want it, I've actually sent it before. I've emailed it. I've talked about it before. That clearly says 6 years. During the next break, I'll probably pull it up and have it for you. So this regional manager at the IRS came in while I was talking, interrupted me on the microphone and said, no, it's not 6, it's 10 years. And I stared at her in shock and said, what in the world? And her manager was there with her. No, it's 10 years, it's 10 years. And I said, look, I'm going to continue with my presentation, but it's 6 years. And if you want the IRM citation that says it's 6 years, come to me afterwards and I'll give it to you. And so I was blown away that they would do that. And again, that was years ago that they were giving that bad information, and they still tell people that all the time. So this Forbes article really, it misses one part of this, the IRM, Internal Revenue Manual, which it's like reading, it's not as bad as reading the IRS code itself, the tax code, but it's close to it. But once you find what you're looking for, it's actually written and fairly easy to understand, but you've got to go through a whole bunch of stuff to get to the real weight of it. So the Forbes article says there's other authoritative sources as well. And I actually make a mistake and say the only authoritative source is the IRB, a voluminous and little-known collection published weekly. Not true. They also have to follow the IRM. And I've cited the IRM to the IRS multiple times. Do it not all the time, but if you're using and following the IRM, you can, the IRS will eat their words, or they have to deal and try to explain their position on an article, but they can't fly in the face of the IRM. So if you're not familiar with the Internal Revenue Bulletin, again, it comes out weekly. I'm going to share this real quick. This is what it looks like. The IRB just comes out weekly. It's like reading dry ice. I mean, it's just, but it gives you a highlight of what the IRS is talking about. So revocation of failure to meet the code sections for 501c3 or charitable organizations. That's what this week is about. And then you can't rely on these headlines and brief explanations. You have to dive deeper in the code. And yes, it's about 100 pages long, or 60. It's about 60 pages long. So each article. So this is where they get in there. They really write this out. This is authoritative. You can rely on this, but it's one of the few things that you can rely on at the IRS. So jumping back to the Forbes article, so you can spot information, even official online publications with the IRS. The IRS has put out all kinds of information. They do facts, and I've shared a lot of information from facts that are helpful. But you have to understand where they're coming from, because a lot of this information, lo and behold, is done quickly, it's done poorly, and you can't trust it. So the scary thing is the IRS revealed in an internal memo that its online tax guidance doesn't carry legal weight. So whatever it puts out there online, unless it's the IRB or the IRM, carries zero legal weight. So when you go to court and you start citing these things, the IRS will say, hey, that's not based on that. When you're told something or you use something directly from the IRS website, make sure it's correct. Make sure the tax professional is going to the source, going to the actual tax code, the Internal Revenue Manual, or the IRB. And these are very arcane, hard to read through. So what are you supposed to do as a taxpayer? Make sure that you're dealing with experienced tax professionals. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people where they're not dealing with someone that truly understands the tax laws and how it affects people. So this little known memorandum said that anything not published in the IRB isn't legally binding. It's not on it's vanished from the IRS website, but there are archived versions still available. And they don't clarify that anywhere, that unofficial information on their website, in their facts, in their pronouncements, aren't legally binding. So it makes it easy for taxpayers to get it wrong. The Government Accountability Office, or GAO, it's supposed to be making sure that these issues are addressed, flagged this as early as 2016. There's no disclaimers about their limitations, and the IRS has done little to nothing to inform taxpayers of their positions. So make sure that when someone is telling you something, that it goes straight to the original source. It's not something that taxpayers are going to be able to read through. So again, it's how it's written. It's not written for normal consumption. It's not even written. So tax professionals couldn't go through it very quickly, but they should be familiar with it. And so that's a very confusing thing. It's a hard thing when dealing with the IRS, that when they tell you things, a lot of times it's incorrect. Now, the frustrating thing recently is that a lot of times when you ask, I just yesterday I had someone that told me, oh, there's no way this will be accepted, blah, 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 blah. And I went over the case with them, and he said, I said, look, the numbers match. The guy broke his femur in this case, was hospitalized in a hospital bed. What do you want from him? Of course he's not making enough money to meet his expenses. So I demanded to get forwarded to a manager. I'm asking for manager callbacks. And, again, I got such crazy pushback. The guy was absolutely ridiculous. But instead of trying to take care of a taxpayer, again, the guy almost died twice going through this. He wants to be more and more demanding than ever. So again, it's just because the IRS is pushing back, just because they are fighting, it doesn't mean they're right. It often means they're not. And getting beyond them to a manager, getting beyond to someone that can actually take a look at it, someone that actually knows what they're doing and has experience to handle more complicated cases. That's the trick, and that's the tough part with the IRS, because their transparency and their communication with managers is worse than ever. I almost never get a manager call back. I almost never get, and during a call, I used to always be able to ask for a team lead or a manager to step in and have a second voice on the call that I could talk to. Very rarely happens today. And again, this is because our customer service is in the toilet, which is frustrating when people are actually trying to get things done with the IRS. So again, IRB is the gold standard for reliable information. If someone is not going through this, beware. And one of the things that is interesting is, here's an example of people that relied on it through a program that doesn't even exist, so I'm not going to rely on it anymore. But the taxpayer bill of rights, and this is an interesting part. The IRS has put out this taxpayer bill of rights, and it's even been codified. It was adopted in 2014, and in 2015 they made it part of U.S. tax law by actually inserting it into the code. Neither taxpayers or practitioners have paid much attention to it, but because it's in the code and it has this right to be informed, allows courts to stop the IRS from contradicting its own publications and instructions. Do not rely on verbal advice. So we're at the break, so I'm going to come right back and continue this and how to deal with the IRS, how to get good information. Welcome back, everybody. So it's interesting. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights is something I have talked about and hammered on and gone through line by line with on this show. It's something the IRS too often ignores, but they shouldn't. So again, the fact that it's codified, that it's in the tax law, really gives people a weapon to use against the IRS when they are being ridiculous. But sometimes it goes to tax law, and I've seen times where it didn't matter. The courts had decided against the taxpayers, and so it was very difficult to address that. So the main takeaway: be aware and be wary. Every time I say wary, makes me think of the Huffalump song with Winnie the Pooh. But be careful. Be very careful what you rely on online. They're not infallible, can often be wrong. When you call the IRS and they give you information verbally, take it with a grain of salt. It might be right, it might be absolutely wrong. So again, to get good information, one, you have to be talking to the right people at the IRS, and it's very difficult to know who actually, if you don't know, it's very difficult to know if they're giving you I'm telling you bad information or giving you bad information. But in general, the IRS will only help so far. One thing that kills me is when they tell people, just file an offer and compromise. They do that all the time, mainly to get people off the phone on a difficult conversation if they don't know or if they can't get a good result or decent result from collections. They'll just tell people, oh, well, just file an offer and compromise. Most of the time they tell people that the individual doesn't qualify, and they go to file an offer and compromise, it gets rejected, and they don't even understand why. So again, if you're confused, if you're not getting the result, you need to, and this is one of her, for definitive guidance, always consult the IRB, but also seek advice from a seasoned tax professional is a wise move. And a seasoned or experienced tax professional. Staying informed and cautious with expert help can avoid costly mistakes and make sure that you're backed by authoritative sources that will help you. So the author of this article is Ms. Torrey. She's an international tax professional living overseas and has been doing this since 1984. So she's been doing this for 40 years. I've only been doing this for 15 years, but again, I've been a tax professor. I've taught, written books, etc. But again, it's very important that you are talking to someone that knows what you're doing. So that's all we're going to get from that article. So just to kind of wrap up, I just want to kind of go through how do you deal with the IRS with all the misinformation, bad information out there. It can drive people crazy. And here's the crazy part. It's changing. So the IRS is changing all the time. Case in point, this year alone, just in the last few months, we had a case, and the IRS is trying to reject every single offer they can, which is a huge violation of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. You're not supposed to be able to sue the offer unit, but it's coming. It's coming. So again, with the ridiculousness that's going on at the IRS, do not hesitate to call a tax professional, get someone that's going to fight for you. 2, call your politicians, especially your federal ones. Call the House of Representatives, call your senators, make your voice heard, because that is when they're going to respond, is when they're hearing from enough people complaining about the IRS and how ridiculous they're being. So tell your story. When politicians start hearing from their constituents regularly, that's when they take action. Again, aside from that, they only listen to lobbyists, and there's very few lobbyists. There are some taxpayer groups, taxpayer advocacy groups, but they're usually drowned out, or the IRS, especially with the current administration, just isn't listening. So we need enough politicians, representatives in Congress, and senators especially, to hear these complaints, to hear how horrible the IRS is and that people need help. So making your voice heard is a big first step. Getting good representation is key. So again, as tax attorneys, we're busy. It just is. But whoever you're going to use needs to make time to talk to you within 24 to 48 hours. That's our goal, is to always have that line of communication open. If I'm too busy in the moment, we try to set an appointment so that you can talk to us throughout your entire case. And that's one thing that we tell people when people finally talk to me, and I say it like it's too hard. If I can, I just pick up the phone and call them, or I'll talk to them right there in the moment. But because we're busy, it's a lot of times it'll be an email or a text. Hey, how can I help you? If it's a more complicated issue, we'll set up an appointment within the next day or two to talk to them. But if you haven't heard from your representative for months and you've tried to communicate with them, that's a problem. I've had people that pay companies for years and not get regular communication or response, and they don't know what's going on with their case. So I had one person try to hire us. And I say try to hire us because I kind of put the brakes on things. And we're trying to do right by people, right by taxpayers. They were in the middle of an offer and compromise with another company, and they didn't know what's going on. They thought it had been rejected, whatever. I said, well, send me your forms. I'll look over them, but I don't want you to hire me, and I don't want to step on someone else's toes when they're right in the middle of an offer. I've had people, sorry, my leg just fell. I've had people try to do that to me and to my clients, and I think it's kind of unethical because you're blowing up their case, potentially causing a lot of damage right in the middle of one of the most sensitive times. I'd rather someone see it through with their current company if you're that far along, and I'd hate to sit there and go and charge them if someone else is already helping them. You know, if it's just going to be accepted anyway. I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So someone that's not just to hire you, not trying to get your dollars as fast as possible, but they're trying to do what's right by you and give you good advice throughout the process. So good advice, sit back, talk to different taxpayer professionals, look them up, read their reviews. Unfortunately, I have one tax professional locally where people have come to me and they said, look, we can't go with this guy. He was drunk or tipsy in our consultation. We sat down, we had to pay to sit down and meet with him. If you have to pay a couple $100 to sit with somebody, don't feel obligated to hire them. Trust me, that money, a couple $100 is might be worth the initial consultation, but if they're going to not represent you, you don't feel comfortable with them, go find somebody else. And there are plenty of companies out there, ours included, that do free consultations so that you can get some advice. And we believe that you shouldn't have to pay an arm and a leg just to get some good information. And when you have questions, make sure you're talking to the right person. This is the worst part of it. So I can't tell you how many times I'm dealing with someone in collections and they don't know what they're doing. And this is because they're hiring so many new people. I'm dealing with revenue officers that don't know what they're doing. And the offer and compromise program, they usually know what they're doing. But the new rules that are being put in place are making it harder than ever to actually talk to a manager, talk to someone that's familiar with it, and actually get your rights respected. I've been blown away by how many times the offer examiner just does something in a ridiculous manner, violates my client's rights, and really leaves my client in a bind. So we're appealing more cases than ever. Don't hesitate if you think your rights are being violated. Don't hesitate to appeal, to push beyond if you think the IRS is being ridiculous. But there are plenty of times where people just don't understand what's going on and they just appeal anyway. So this is why it is very helpful. I have people that just want to sue the IRS. They want to fight them. They want to do all this stuff, and it hurts them. I've seen plenty of cases go to the DOJ, and I was talking to someone yesterday about this. They take cases to tax court that shouldn't be there. And when you're still fighting the IRS, you still keep your rights. But when you go to tax court, it's going to cost you $20,000 to $25,000 to go to tax court. So make sure you have a big enough issue, and that you are legally in the right, not morally, not you feel justified, but make sure you're going to win, or that you have a good case at winning. I can't tell you how many people have gone beyond tax court to the DOJ, or case wasn't resolved in tax court that went on to the DOJ, where you lose your rights. This is where people lose homes, lose property, and I've actually had to help in the sale of property to try to get rid of a second home and keep their primary home, but it's not guaranteed. Nothing like that's guaranteed when dealing with the Department of Justice. So it really is making sure that you have good representation. Make sure you know your rights from the start. And listen, if someone's telling you, hey, be careful, be aware here, and you don't like them and you fire them just to get someone that will tell you what you want to hear, there's plenty of attorneys that will tell you what you want to hear, collect the money, and then disappear. True story. This is a DOJ case. I was brought on board when it was already with the DOJ trying to resolve this. They had $1 million home in Texas, had a mortgage on it, but about $800,000 in equity in it, $600,000 to $800,000 in equity, which is why they were forcing the sale. Someone else had filed with tax court for them, charged them $25,000, put a lien on the property, expecting that the property would be sold eventually so that they would make sure they would get paid out, and then filed in the wrong venue. Any first-year law student knows the wrong venue is they just messed up, filed it in the wrong place. It got immediately rejected, but this guy still got paid out eventually for flubbing and messing up and filing in front of the wrong tax court. Didn't even get heard, didn't even get a day in court, wasn't even looked at. It's like, this is the wrong place, try again. He didn't try again. He billed the clients and took that money. In my opinion, highly unethical, but they were convinced he was the greatest attorney out there. Why wasn't he still helping them then? That's my question. Someone comes and they do one thing, and then they leave you hanging. They don't give you advice. They don't stick with you and fight till the bitter end. Probably not the best representative for you. So the IRS is moving faster than ever on collections, on liens, on collecting from people across the board. Make sure you're protected. Make sure you have someone that's responding quicker than ever. It used to be that we could get 30 days hold at a time pretty easily. Now it's closer to 7 and sometimes as little as 3 days to respond to IRS collections, which is nuts. In 3 days, half the time you can't even get a hold of the client when you call them, text them, email them. They might be on vacation, they might be out, they could be sick. I just had someone that didn't respond for 5 months. This is the case where the gentleman broke his femur, was in the hospital, almost died twice. He's not paying attention to his email, he's just trying to live. And now he's out, but dealing with all the hospitals, all that stress, and I finally got a hold of him after 5 months because of the emergency he was going through. So protect yourself by getting good advice, making sure you have good people behind you. And if you have questions, give us a call, 520-485-7371. You can always go get a hold of us through our website as well at guardiantaxlaw.com, and all these videos are posted. So our whole goal with these videos is to provide good information so people know how to respond, they know what to rely on, and how to get your rights respected. The IRS has put out the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. They put out these other notices. for people, and that's one thing they require. That's when every time we hire someone, that one of the first things we send out, it's a law that we do so, is Publication 1, Taxpayer Bill of Rights. So they have that put out all the time, and then you have to fight the IRS like crazy to get your rights respected. But in the end, you are entitled to a resolution as long as you qualify, and unless you completely blow up your case, 99% of the time, you'll get a resolution. Unless you do everything wrong, listen to horrible advice, even then we're able to salvage most cases. Give us a call if you have any questions. You can go through and watch these old episodes on our YouTube channel as well, and protect you and your family. The best way is to avoid these issues to start with, and we will absolutely guide you and help put you in the hands of great CPAs that will take care of you. But when you do have a mess, call the best, and find that peace of mind that you and your family deserve. So I hope you have a great day. Again, this is kind of a scary episode, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a way to make sure that you can find relief from the IRS. And with that, we'll wish you adieu, and we will see you tomorrow.